company has a right to collect the debt, but they must do it by lawful means. And because consumers have rights, people have rights, and just because you're behind on your credit card doesn't mean that you forfeit all legal rights. And these tactics are meant to extort payment from people. Now, the federal law, which is frankly stronger than the state law in this case, outlines very specific rights that a consumer has, that an individual has. And just because a debt is deemed, a bill is deemed as overdue, doesn't mean that the consumer doesn't have rights. These tactics violate those rights. Clearly the impersonating of the police officer, but the whole scare, the whole threat, we're going to throw you in jail, pay today, the district attorney. There was no district attorney warrant. There was no judge warrant. These were all tactics to get people to pay a bill. Some people have paid the bill that don't even owe the money. The tactics are so effective that some people get so scared they will just pay the bill to get rid of the tactics. Now this case is more egregious, but we've seen many cases where people pay bills that they didn't owe just because of the harassment tactics. Last point is, and I've said this before, we are doing everything we can to now help the victims of these tactics. It is always easier if a person checks with our office first. The Attorney General's office is just your law firm. That's all we are. Check with us before you sign on to one of these contracts. If you have any questions, if it sounds too good to be true, if you're not sure of the law, please check with us first. We set up a website specifically on this purpose, nydebthelp.com, nydebthelp.com, all one word. Know the facts before you sign on to one of these companies. Again, this is an ongoing investigation on the entire debt industry, and this is only one manifestation of that. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more as the economy slows and people get into trouble economically. Thank you for taking the time, sir.
Mr. Cuomo, this gentleman, Mr. Borland, he had a criminal record, he was a convicted felon, and he was able to not only operate but own a business, buy debt and a lot of people's financial information. And the law allows it. Do you think that the law needs to be changed?
Yes. You want a longer answer or that's a short answer? Sometimes short answer is fine. Yes, I think this is one of those areas that cries out for more scrutiny and more regulation. Why? Because this was a more or less sleepy area over the past decade, right? This industry only pops up once the economy slows down. If people aren't behind on their debts, it's a relatively slow industry. So I give the example of the hurricane refinancers. They can only work after a hurricane. This debt industry can only thrive when there's a large level of debt, which requires the economy to slow, and here we have, in many ways, a record recession, right? So it is a relatively new problem. I believe there needs to be more scrutiny and regulation. I've spoken to the governor and the legislative bodies about it. The Assembly has passed a bill that I think is a good start. Senate hasn't passed it for many and varied reasons, but I believe the state should step up to the plate and provide more regulations and more protections for the consumer. There is a federal body of law that is frankly more advanced and sophisticated than the state law, but I think the state law should be brought up to speed.
This guy Boylan must have been getting a pretty good commission with his strong arm tactics. Can you say anything about that?
There are a number of ways that these debt collection companies work. Sometimes they get a commission on behalf of a company. Sometimes they buy the debt outright, and whatever they get, they keep. In both instances, they obviously have an incentive to recover as much as they can. You could argue when they own the debt, they have an even higher economic upside, and therefore more incentive. Our information to date is that in this case, some of the debt was actually purchased from companies, therefore he owned the debt and he was collecting on his own debts.
Any idea how much